Yes, all of them are joined, sir.
Hello, Sushila, how are you?
Yes,
Good. How are you?
Good to see you.
Live streaming started.
You're in Chennai?
Are you asking me?
Oh, yeah.
No, I'm very much here.
Okay.
30 seconds, we'll start, Mr. Narayan. We are
Sure.
so people log in. By the time I'll briefly tell them something. Shall we go ahead? Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Very warm welcome to each one of you for another edition of our evening talk. This time it's something unique subject, which is a subject which will be a lot of interest to so many people. And we have got some outstanding panelists. And also we are going to discuss about the theme of the book, which is authored by my dear friend, well-wisher, Mr. Sathiya. Before I do that, I will just mention about 2-3 events which is happening in MMA. This is only to give allowance time to some of the people who are in the queue to log in, because Zoom, yes, unlike our other social media portal, you click and get in here, your password, you put one number wrong, you're getting back again. So it takes time. So coming to next event, I know you must have got it already in your inbox, all the events, what you have planned in the month of April, May till June. We are almost finalized most of the event. We have lined up some outstanding event next week. That's on 17th of this month, coming Saturday. We have an event on the theme. This event is hybrid event. We are doing at Leela Palace. And we are restricting to only 100 members due to present situation, because we have some outstanding international speaker. Dr. Ritter is joining us from Germany. Unfortunately, he's not able to travel because of the present situation. And the theme what we are going to be discussing is free trade post-pandemic, national versus regional. How does this with Atma Nirbhar and various other initiatives of government, and how our collaboration with some of the international organizations, the countries, are we going pre-91, and how is going to really impact our growth, trade, so many things. And we got some outstanding panelists, as I mentioned. We have Mr. Moorthy is likely to join us. Then we have Mr. Sundar Ramasamy, as Vice Chancellor still at Kriya University, moving away from Kriya University shortly. He joining us, one of the great economists. Then Kumar, the head of Deloitte Economics, he is manufacturing Deloitte. He'll be joining us for the discussion. Then Air Marshal Matheshwaran, is the head of Peninsula Foundation. He's one of the, he's going to be moderating, leading a discussion with Professor Arun Kumar. Arun Kumar is a Malcolm Alsisha Award. He's also a professor of JNU, and he's got some very interesting views on the various things, including GST. And so the idea is to get discussion where views and counter views, so that we all understand what exactly we stand. Ultimately, we stand for Atmanirbhar and where we really think that you're going to go to the next level. Besides that, we're also having an interesting event on 7th of May on China. Dr. Ganesh Nadarajan, they written a lovely paper on China to discuss on how do you handle China during challenging times, and how you going to face the challenges, and how India is going to engage with them. The number of issues is going to be discussed. Again, we have an outstanding panelist. These were 2 events where I thought we should not miss. Besides that, we have a number of events lined up during the month of April itself. We have a startup series being led by Mr. Shankar, in conversation with Shankar, who is the founder of CAMS. Then we also have a success story. We also have a Women's Managers Forum, an event on how the woman to build a brand in these difficult times, and also how the branding building is very important for women in terms of success in their organization, the entrepreneurial venture. Besides that, we have a number of events on entrepreneurship, everything. Next 6-7 events are there, next few days left. Please do join us. And coming to today's event, the theme of the discussion by the outstanding panelists is going to be social infrastructure as political investment for economic development, Tamil Nadu experience. And I know we have done a couple of events with Mr. Narayan and others in MMA, where it was clearly discussed, and we see the Dravidian culture which has been brought in the state of Tamil Nadu, brought in so much of developments in terms of, though the infrastructure development is not as much as expected in terms of power, in terms of other infrastructure development, still industries really queue up to Tamil Nadu to come and invest and join the venture. Even during the pandemic, the investors program was opened up, where some 50,000 crores, the MOU was signed with the 2 lakh jobs. and so many social infrastructure which is been created, made the people to really socially come up and live up to the expectations of what the other, I always have a keyword, what rich man enjoy, every poor man enjoy. Some of the things which the Dravidian culture trying to bring in to the people to, so that everybody is even able to access to internet, every kid is have some of the laptop, the place, bicycle to go to the place of work, and good toilet, good school. So many things I know that people think. And another thing, I at least personally happy that Tamil Nadu is the role model for some of the initiative, which most of the, not only the other states, even the national thing which has been followed. One is the midday meal scheme, which was launched long time ago. There are so many other schemes which have been launched. So discuss everything, and where do we stand today? How is it going to be thing? Can this continue forever? And is this thing work with the way the educated new young lot is coming in? And will be there. Before that, let me warmly welcome our distinguished guest of honor for this evening, Dr. S. Narayanan, IAS retired and the former economic advisor to Prime Minister. I think I'll introduce also all the speakers for this evening. And after introducing the speakers, we'll talk about the book which Sathiya was written for a minute, and we will talk about the book. Thereafter, we'll discuss on things. Let me have the privilege of also welcoming the distinguished speakers. Also introduce Mr. Narayanan. Can I have the profile of Mr. Narayanan on screen, please? Yeah, you want to introduce, Mr. Narayanan IAS, you all know, former economic advisor. Prime Minister is not new to MMA, he was also former finance secretary. And prior to this assignment, Narayan served in number of Government of India, finance, economic affairs. Narayan obtained his PhD from the Indian Institute of Technology in New Delhi, and he is also MPhil in Development Economics from Cambridge University. Narayan has himself authored, edited a couple of books, and we had the privilege of associating these books also in MMA. He has been a visiting senior research fellow of the Institute of South Asian Studies, National University of Singapore since 2005. Very warm welcome, Narayan. Mr. Narayan speaks, we really learn a lot. At least I'll walk miles to listen to Narayan on the subject, anything what is good. Very warm welcome to Mr. Narayan. Let me have now the privilege of introducing our next distinguished speaker for this evening. Ms. Sushila Ravindranath. Again, Sushila Ravindranath, journalist, columnist, not new to MMA. She's been associated with the MMA for the last couple of decades and done a lot of work with MMA. We are eagerly looking forward. We always look up to her with reference for number of our joint initiatives. And it's my privilege to introduce her. Over 30 years of experience in business journalism. And Sushila is also began her career as a Business India Mumbai. But despite multi-billion-dollar industries like Burkapa Group, TVS Group, and number of remains, why One India is best kept secret. Attempting to change this, she has also debuted as an author with Search, a book that traces the growth story of India. We are also entrepreneurial, but quite. We don't want to draw attention to ourselves, which is one of the reasons never got credit as entrepreneurial state. I think very, very valid statement, and which I'm quite sure she'll show some light on what made her think on this line. Very warm welcome to you, Ms. Sushila Ravindranath. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Let me have the privilege of introducing next distinguished speaker, guest of honor for this evening. Professor Janakarajan is the president of South Asia Consortium of Interdisciplinary Water Resource Studies, Hyderabad, and former professor of MIDS. He's a PhD in economic. Currently, the professor of Madras Institute of Development Studies. He has also been in the post-doctoral work in Cornell University, USA, and subsequently visiting professor of Oxford University. And all the detailed professor already been shared with you. Another important event at the moment is after 13 meetings, both states have arrived at some conclusion in terms of water management, especially the Kaveri family. He's also president of South Asia Consortium Interdisciplinary Water Studies. Yeah, and I personally consider Janakarajan's authority on water because his thoughts on the negotiation in terms of water. Water is going to be a single issue which is going to be happening not only between the states, also between the nations. Very warm welcome to you, Mr. Janakarajan. It's a pleasure to have you with us this evening. And last but not least, my dear friend and who is the most important person for this evening, Mr. Sathiya. Sathiya is a distinguished fellow and head of Chennai Initiative of War, an author of veteran journalist and political columnist. And most of you would have seen his articles regularly in Hindu Times of India, and especially his thoughts on Sri Lanka and some of the issues which is facing in the Tamil Nadu politics is really, really thought-provoking. And a keen observer of national and neighborhood policies, as he mentioned. Sathiya has worked with several newspapers in India, both English and local language. He has edited Advisor Triangular Group of Sri Lanka and was the best based in Colombo. He toured USA as an IVP scholar of the US State Department in October-November 2005, where he obtained the first-hand knowledge of the US electoral systems and operations and he's been a great supporter of MMA. We always do a lot of events together. Very warm welcome to you, Mr. Sathya. And today, before I hand over the proceeding to Mr. Sathya, let me have the privilege. We also have the privilege of launching the book written by authored by Mr. Sathya, J to J, Justice Party to Jayalalitha and After. And Mr. Sathya will also, yes, thank you. Many congratulations, Mr. Sathya, for writing this book and also choosing MMA platform to launch this book. We are indeed privileged. This is a subject which everybody should know. We are really honored to do this launch of the book. I am quite sure people read to know more about the state of Tamil Nadu. Now I'll request Mr. Sathya to talk about the theme of the book. Thereafter, you can request the speakers to discuss on the theme, which is the topic for this evening discussion. Over to you, Mr. Sathya.
Good evening, Vijay, and good evening, everybody. And thank you, Team MMA, for organizing this year, particularly Group Captain Vijay Kumar and his Never Say Die team. And before I begin, let me extend my advance greetings for Ugadi, Tamil New Year, and wish to all of you. And I should thank the three speakers, Dr. S. Narayan, Sushila, Ravindranath, and Dr. Janakarajan. Of the two, Dr. S. Narayan and Sushila have recently written books in the last 2 years on Tamil Nadu. Dr. Narayan's book, Trillion Years, outlines some of the policy initiatives, particularly with relation to the noon meal scheme, how it was launched, how it worked, all the finer details, which he could see and view first as an administrator and then evaluated as an academic also. Likewise, Sushila's search, which talks about the industrialization of Tamil Nadu over the last so many decades, also nails the unfounded common belief that Tamil Nadu hasn't grown. There is no industry here, there is no industrial development, infrastructure development, etc. And my good friend Janakarajan, also an economist, though is known better for his work on Kaveri water and other water-related issues and disputes, has a keen eye for social, political, and socio-economic developmental issues. And now about the book, as Vijay said, this book was in the making for 25 years. I won't say making, that's a wrong phrase. I wrote the first draft about in 1995 before the elections. Someone wanted a book published. I wrote a draft, but it did not work out because those people wanted a lot of sleeves. I said, sorry, that's not my road. Then it got delayed and delayed until the present publisher, Tamri Brothers. They heard about the story and they wanted it out before the election. In fact, a Tamil edition was due before the election, but it may be hitting the stands anytime now. Thanks to COVID-related restrictions, now it is getting delayed. And when we talk about the topic of the day, topic of the evening, this goes back to what I have written. In fact, the final chapters of this book touches upon the social infrastructure aspects and how it has impacted on the economy of the state positively. And the story began 100 years back with the launch of the Justice Party and whatever the reason for which it was known. The Justice Party's social justice scheme or the reservation scheme introduced a new element whose multiple and multifarious evolution is what we are seeing today. Whether, as Vijay rightly pointed out, about a free laptop scheme, free bicycle scheme, or free rice scheme. These are all a contemporary expression of the political classes' inspirational initiatives. For instance, I do not know how many in the younger generation actually know that in parts of Tamil Nadu, eating rice on a daily basis was not on. They couldn't afford it, poor people. Further, as they used to show in some Tamil films occasionally, eating rice for Diwali, New Year, etc., by itself was a great achievement for the family. This all became possible only because of the governmental intervention that has also improved the social status and the social self-confidence of communities after communities, which not many of us seem to recognize. And there is another element that's actually provided political stability. We can say Dravidian hold or Dravidian parties haven't looking at the national perspective, things like that. But Tamil Nadu, you take, for instance, over the last 40 years, we had to live three relationships with the leader, Janaki Ramachandran, for that few months, who was also the shortest serving chief minister of Tamil Nadu without facing the assembly. We had for 45 years, only Karnanidhi, MGR and Jayalalitha, if you take about 1 or 2 years of president's rule in 4 installments. That is say, on an average, our chief ministers were in around for 15 years. Karnanidhi, as we know, for instance, served 4 generations and was in office for a total of 18 years. Jayalalitha was 15 years, MGR for 10 years. This kind of political stability is not made available elsewhere in any of the other states. Yes, we can go back and say Mohanlal Sugadia was a chief minister of Rajasthan for 10 years. That was in a different generation. That was in the generation. Kamraj was the chief minister of Tamil Nadu for 10 years and gave it up voluntarily for other reasons. So, this Dravidian rule also comes with the political stability and continuity. That is why they are able to provide the kind of continuity in policy making and taking forward. Yes, it is always used to be said that between the DMK and ADMK there was some kind of a policy vindictiveness. If one of them, while in power, initiates something, the other would stop it, stymie it, or withdraw it. That ended with the economic reform, thankfully. Both the ADMK government, Jayalalitha government was in power at that time, and Karnanidhi followed, and until 2016, every 5 years there was a change of government in Tamil Nadu, and they did not stop with the earlier government's scheme. They did not turn up those schemes, but build on them. Maybe there may be exception that has nothing to do with the socio-political or the socio-economic building. For instance, you can talk about what is now the multi-specialty hospital on Mount Road, Chennai. That's a totally different political issue. That has nothing to do with our developmental agenda. But on development agenda, for instance, take the noon meal scheme, on which Dr. Narayan's book deals with, among other issues. That was launched by Kamraj first. It had been wounded up. Obviously, died a natural death, owing to because it was a voluntary scheme plus aid from US. Once that stopped and the price went up and availability became difficult in the early 60s, it died. MGR made it a government scheme, and from then on till today, it has really continued. It has successive chief ministers, independent of their political views and personal animosities, have built on the previous own schemes. And if you walk into any Tamil Nadu village today and ask someone above 50 years, 45 years, 50 years, they will tell you stories, their own personal stories of how this scheme helped them won't stay on in school, eat a meal, at least one meal a day, and also pick up some education. That first generation led to the next generation that aspired to complete schooling, and from there move the next thing, college education to professional college, and all these things, a stable government, continuity in policy, and missionary leadership in a purely socio-political and socio-economic view, all have contributed to the kind of industrial development which Sushila has also mentioned. Rather, her book is all about that. Now, again, this book per se is trying to also blow off some certain contemporary myths. For instance, there is always a belief now that the forward caste stop getting their due in government jobs or higher education because of the Dravidian party starting with the Justice Party. This is untrue. Yes, Justice Party is a communal GO 1 and 2 of 1921 and 1924, which were actually implemented by through law. The Justice Parties were by government order GO, whereas the 1927 government of Dr. Subbarayan was through a assembly, the council law. They actually provided for reservations, for instance, for Brahmins, 16%. This went on until after independence, and only when the Constitution, the Supreme Court said under the in the Government of India's Constitution, reservations can be accepted only for scheduled castes and tribes under the Constitution. These have to go. And of course, there is the Periyar movement, Tamil Nadu movement, the First Amendment, which provided for backward class reservation. And on reservation, we have traveled a lot. But the contemporary generation doesn't even know, or doesn't even, and their elders possibly don't want to educate the youngsters that there was reservation for upper caste also until after independence. There are a lot of misunderstanding, misinformation, calculated and otherwise, in very different facets of. For instance, in Tamil Nadu, contemporary Tamil Nadu, I'm talking about our own time, the last 3-4 years. Only of us really know that Tamil Nadu has the highest ratio of medical doctors for citizenry. There are nearly 238 or 240 doctors in Tamil Nadu for every 1,000 population, which is equivalent to what is available in Scandinavian countries like Norway and Sweden. So it doesn't mean that this kind of socio-political investment or politico-economic investment on the society has in borne fruit. And when you talk about a NEET protest or a case against NEET or the new education policy, we have to look at it from that perspective. What exactly has happened in Tamil Nadu? Why is Tamil Nadu opposing it? It is not for the sake of opposing it first. Where Tamil Nadu has never been anti-national as it's again made out to be. Yes, Periyar opposed independence, but Annadurai went and delivered a speech welcoming independence on All India Radio, Chennai, Madras at that time. Then DMK, when founded in 1949, was also opposed to wanted a separate Tamil Nadu. By 1960, they gave up because by 1957 election, they won 16 assembly seats, and they sat there and saw how a government can get things done. They saw Comrade government implementing a welfare scheme that was DMK's agenda or the communist agenda, which they ended up hijacking when the reorganization of states took away the communist areas to either Kerala or Andhra Pradesh. So they automatically gave it up. It is not that the DRI, DIR, Defense of India rules of 1962, which came 2 years later, was a cause for DMK withdrawing this independent state demand. Interestingly, had it is only because of the reorganization of states, possibly, Kerala became the first state in the country or in the democratic world to have a democratically elected communist government. You go by the number of seats, etc. The Malabar, cutting off of Malabar and merging it with Kerala and some of the parts of Andhra Pradesh, which again left MLAs, left-leaning MLAs to the Madras State Assembly before reorganization, to show that the DMK agenda in 1957 was a merger of communist agenda and their nationalist, Tamil nationalist agenda. Ultimately, we have to see and accept it is a political ideological demand that has stuck. The rest has gone. But unfortunately, the lack of understanding or motivation, that campaign against this Tamil ideology, the idea of Tamil Nadu, is also now giving way to a counter movement, which I am afraid may lead to consequences that may not be in the interest of the state or the nation. Thank you. Thank you again. And it is sad that one of our favorite friends, Somi Hasari, won't be around with us anymore. He passed away, as most of you know. 29th March, owing to a heart attack. Our prayers are to him. Now over to you, Group Captain Vijay Kumar. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Sathimurthy, for setting the context. Now, as I mentioned to you earlier, now we'll be having a discussion with the distinguished guest of honor for this evening. Social infrastructure as political investment for economic development, Tamil Nadu experience. We have over 600 viewers watching as of now. The more people will join. And now each of the speaker, distinguished guest of honor, Mr. Narayan, Mr. Janakarajan, and Madam Sushila Ravindranath. I think I request you to share your insights on the theme for about 10 to 15 minutes. Thereafter, we'll have a Q&A session, and we also request Sathimurthy to join the Q&A session. If it's okay with you or any other format would like to do that, sir, Mr. Narayan, I'll go with your advice.
That's fine. That's fine.
Fine, sir. Go ahead. We'll start with Mr. Narayan. Thereafter, I'll request Sushila Ravindranath to share our views. Then we request Janakarajan. Thereafter, we'll have a Q&A session with all the distinguished guests of honor. I already got a number of questions from the social media. Over to Mr. Narayan.
Thank you. Thank you, Group Captain, for giving me this opportunity of interaction. And particularly Sathimurthy for that absolutely excellent book, which is called J to J, Justice Party to Jayalalitha and After. And what one can see from the book is the very deep, continuous political knowledge of Tamil Nadu, in particular in this book, that he is bringing on the scene. That means he is able to capture the nuances of the political, not just the decisions, but the political ideology, political thought, political movement behind the decision. So it's a fascinating read, absolutely a fascinating read, and reveals really a deep knowledge of the socio-political fabric of the state. And he is able to relate it to the historic development of the movement as well as the changes in the social structure. Where I would like to move on from that is to, set a couple of thoughts for discussion. And I would start with, one thought which forms a chapter in Mr. Sathimurthy's book. and the implications and the importance of the movie Parashakti, which came out in 1952. Mr. Satyamurthy argues quite rightly that it was a game changer, and the dialogues of Mr. Karunanidhi, as well as as it launched Shivaji Ganesan on the stage, in the screen. But we have to kind of think back and say, why was it a game changer at that particular point of time? What was happening in 1952 that enabled this to be a game changer? Because the Justice Party movement, as Mr. Satyamurthy rightly argues, more than 100 years old, initially conceived by the British as an alternative by bringing in the so-called educated, landed upper class into a movement that would support the British colonial rule, which they continue to do for a very long period of time. Subsequently moved into the Periyar movement of self-respect, social self-respect for other communities and classes, and then changed over into a mass movement which led to the formation of the DMK as well as the subsequent Dravidian ideologies. The only thought, which perhaps is a very debatable thought, is that 1952 was the time of the Rajaji government, and certain policies of the Rajaji government, especially things like the Kulakkalvi Thittam, were very much going against the grain of the movement, especially the Periyar movement, and also several of the Congress ideologies. The formation of the district boards, which were always headed by big landed gentry. The ministers were all ex-zamindars or belonged to very privileged communities. There was a feeling of alienation. I mean, we can jump from 1952 straight to the Marina Beach in I say 2017 or 18, when Jallikattu became such an important issue. And this was a kind of a natural, intrinsic movement without any particular political leadership from any of the Dravidian parties. Therefore, it is important to understand that there is something in the social fabric of Tamil Nadu which speaks up for a Tamil identity. Very interestingly, all of you may have seen that in the recent election advertisements, on one particular day in the Hindu, there were 2 full-page advertisements. The advertisements of the ADMK was speaking about all the economic development that the state had made and the opportunities given, etc., social development. Whereas the full-page advertisement of the DMK in the first day spoke of none of this. They say we will give you back your Tamil identity. We will give you a right to be a free Tamil. We will restore your pride in the language as well as in the culture. So in a way, this started with Parashakti, and it is going on today. And it has actually nothing to do with the social development, with the infrastructure. It has nothing to do with the schemes that the governments have brought forward. But there is something intrinsic cultural here, which certainly I would use the word, certainly the BJP is not fully able to understand and to inculcate. Because this is a state where religion and politics are separate. It's not combined as in the UP, in the Ayodhya, etc. Here, religion is everybody goes to the temple. It has nothing to do with political ideology or the Tamil ideology. And this distinction is very, very peculiar to Tamil Nadu. And I leave that as my first thought for discussion. The second thought that I would like to place on the table in the next few minutes is the thought that is really a Tamil Nadu model or is it a success? We need to ask this question, and I will ask this question even of my co-panelists. Where is it possible to argue that Tamil Nadu is an entrepreneurial state? Is it? Because if you look back at the kind of success of industry, most of the successful industries were formed during the Kamraj time, Mr. R. Venkatraman's time. And the successes, early successes that the DMK had of generating a lot of industries, I would call it the period between 1969 and 1973, creating new class of industrialists, have survived much, much more with difficulty than the initial ones which started in the 50s and 60s. And if you look at the current crop of when the CM comes out with memorandum of understanding, etc., of hundreds of crores, thousands of crores, they are with companies who are bringing in businesses into this country, which is totally alien in the sense that none of the Tamil industrialist is in any of those industries. So it is a foreigner or the outsider who is seeing an opportunity in Tamil Nadu, which the Tamil industrialist is not able to see. Am I right? Am I wrong? If you look at the number of billionaires created after 2007, mostly in terms of valuation coming out of the digital space. And if you look at the list, there are, as of today, in March also, there have been 8. Altogether, you're looking at something like 41 or 42. One is from Tamil Nadu. One. So where is the entrepreneurship here? I think we need to think that what we call as a success, I think perhaps we pride ourselves in a kind of a performance which is, I would call it a bit of a mirage and a bit of ephemeral. And fundamentally, if you go into class 8 in any government school and examine the performance of the student, his ability to comprehend and to perform is close to class 3. We have a serious problem with reference to our education. Why are we objecting against NEET and a new education policy? Primarily because the students are being taught a curriculum which does not enable them to compete at a national level. So when we talk about progress, economic progress, infrastructure progress, social progress, often we hide the failures of the kind of schemes that have been brought forth in the last 50 years. I think I will just pause here because I am sure a lot of people will have a lot of questions on the approach that I have taken today. And maybe I'll have an opportunity of speaking later also. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Very, very thought-provoking. I think it's high time we make a self-introspection. Some of the issues we've been discussing quite a bit in MMA. Couple of millennials where you said only one. We started a new series of startup to see that our entrepreneurial thing can be improved and The Tamil Nadu entrepreneurial state, which you brought out rightly, self-introspection is required, as I mentioned. Education area, again mentioned. I think there are a number of questions going to come on these lines, and I request all the audiences who are watching this program, social media, over 600-700 people, send your questions as usual to our WhatsApp, the number which is seen on the stage. All those who are joining the program, Zoom, please type your questions. And I think the distinguished guest of honor and the speakers have kindly agreed to respond to all your questions. Now I request Madam Sushila Ravindranath to share your insights on the theme. Over to you, Sushila, ma'am.
Thank you. I just want to start because you talked about Parashakti, Dr. Narayan. I have a different view. I think it's Enga Veettu Pillai and MGR when he sang Na Nana Ittal, which changed the fortune of the politics in the state. When he appeared on wearing a red t-shirt on a black platform, it just grabbed everybody. The next election went to DMK. It's just a point of it. Parashakti sort of talked about social change, but MGR brought about the political change in the state, which is I've always felt that. So coming back to whether welfare and political development and economic development go hand in hand, I really don't know, because for some reason, the Dravidian parties have never really talked about what they have been trying to do and what they have achieved. In fact, I feel deeply resentful that Dr. Narayan's book and Mr. Sathiya Moorthy's book came after mine, because you would have made my life so much easier, because so many facts and figures which I want are all in your book. Anyway, coming back to this, I think Tamil Nadu was always an entrepreneurial state, but very low. I think even before liberalization happened and many things happened, we were very far away from Delhi. So we were not really able to, at a time when everybody thought the others were, where M&As were taking, mergers and acquisitions were taking place, and people were buying and selling companies, and all kinds of excitement was happening. Tamil Nadu decided to stay out of it. As it happened, it was possibly a very wise decision. But at that point, it did seem like a very, very non-entrepreneurial kind of place. I worked for 2 North-based publications. So I have always been told, what are you going to write in Madras? What are they doing? I mean, it's one of the dullest places you can go to. As I wrote in my book, Madras then was seen as a place you stop before you go to Tirupati. Nobody had any idea what was going on in Tamil Nadu. And it was also, what it stuck in the North Indian Delhi head was, it's the film crazy Tamilians who were voting for MGR and Karnanidhi and Jayalalitha. But in reality, these were people who were politicians. Karnanidhi was a grassroots politician who eventually used film and theatre to his advantage to propagate the views. Like when films happened, he realized it's much more widespread than theatre. You didn't have to take people from place to place. So he cleverly used the film media to propagate the ideas. So the other thing Dr. Narayan said, during Kamraj time, there were so many industries, but these were all public sector industries. And when the Dravidian parties came, they didn't have that kind of influence to go to Delhi and grab licenses and set up industries. They were sort of out of it in the earlier years. We must understand that these people were not speaking Hindi-speaking people. They were not familiar with Delhi. They were learning the ropes. There were hardly anybody they could relate to in Delhi. But we must admit they learned rather fast. But then Tamil Nadu has never been a place of large industries. I'm always told, where is the Ambani or an Adani in your state? Before I come to that, I want to know, do we need an Ambani or an Adani? Of course, it will be great if we had one, if we had them. But this is a state where every district has an industry. I don't think even Maharashtra has. So there are many small people who we are not even aware of. I was just looking at some old issues of the magazine I was working for. Then I suddenly remembered this story. No, not story, something which happened. A gentleman walked into my office and said, I make staples. I said, what staples? He said, yeah, I'm the only one who makes staples. Even in those days, I think this was pre-liberalization days, the government has allowed imports from China. So my business is being destroyed. I've gone to all the mainline newspapers. They find me too small. Can you do something about it? It stirred my imagination, and I wrote a passionate story about it. And somebody read it in Delhi, and then everything was restored, and he was happy. And he came to our office and gave us staples to last us a lifetime. So there were all kinds of things happening, which I've always said we were unaware of. Like, I've also felt it's very, very unfair to paint our political leaders as, film people. Jayalalitha also was trained by MGR. Before she became chief minister, she's campaigned with him, she's traveled to districts, he gave her all kinds of posts. She knew everybody. So it's not as though people just loved her and made her in that case, if they just loved MGR, Janakarajan would have continued to be the chief minister. She just knew. And she built on that. And the other thing is, we've always said, there is revenge politics and so on. There might have been, somebody builds a building and then you say, I'll change the name and, I'll use the building for a different purpose. But as far as public health schemes and education policies were concerned, the governments just moved one step forward. They did not demolish anything. But here again, I agree with Dr. Narayan. There has been a steep drop in quality, but was it anyway good quality to start with? Because MGR was the one, if you remember, who introduced private colleges. Reservation went up to, I think it's MGR's time, 69%. So he sort of countered it by allowing private engineering colleges to come about. So we had a whole lot of engineers when IT happened. We had and they came to Chennai, they came to Tamil Nadu to set up their factories. We had a ready-made English knowing graduates. As someone said, okay, in all these mushrooming of colleges, maybe 20 or 30 were good, but that was enough for them to recruit. So this is, we keep forgetting that we are number 2 in IT and we lead in IT services. Yes, in digital, we may not be a big name, but you see, every youngster has a digital company. They're all into AI, they're all into AOTs, they're all into, in every street you'll find a youngster making an app. Whether they'll grow, whether they'll become big, I don't know. If you take our own success stories like Girish Matrabhutam or Suresh Sambandam, they came from nowhere. They just built it up. They are big. Girish is, of course, very, very big. But there are lots of people who are competing for that space. Where we are, I must go back to history. So I was working for Business India in Bombay. So when I was also very ignorant. I believed this myth that, South was lagging behind. So when I came back, I found I didn't know. I am ashamed to say that the TVS group was the largest auto component manufacturers in the country. They possibly still are, although many newcomers have come. There are nobody who is sort of built on quality like they did. In fact, they introduced the quality movement to the country. ISO and Deming Awards were all won by this group first. So, but yes, we did not go into, there used to be a criticism. So if they are so big, why didn't they manufacture an automobile? Let's also remember that Tata's went into automobile manufacture, but how many years it has taken them to succeed a bit. So the TVS, they just didn't want to lose money, whatever it is. Dr. Narayan said, yeah, but after liberalization, we did get Ford and Hyundai. I don't know, I'm very confused. Does it matter who comes and who puts investment here? They create jobs, they introduce people to technology, they create a whole lot of downstream manufacturers, they're small scale, medium scale suppliers. Okay, they also bring their own suppliers, but eventually the technology sort of seeps in. So that's where it is. So in many cases, again, coming back to healthcare, I don't think any political party has interfered in healthcare. I think we just go one step forward. If Kalendar introduces a copy to the term, then Jayalalitha takes it one step forward. So healthcare, that's why, There are many criticisms how we are dealing with the pandemic, but we must admit that we've done better than many states. It's only because healthcare was important. And social welfare schemes, again, it is easy for people to say, we are creating a state of lazy youngsters. I don't think it's quite true. Is lifestyle enhancement so bad? Doesn't it give incentive for people to do better? They get some basic things. Don't they realize that if they do better, they can get from mixer grinder, they've gone off to now the government, the ruling party, I think, is offering a washing machine. But let's also remember these washing machine, basic level washing machines. If you go to Chennai and look at all the lower income families, all the houses have fridges, all the houses have washing machines, all the houses have color TVs. There's progress happening in ways which we are not aware of, which I feel we are not studying properly. So I would like to leave it at this, and let's see where it takes us. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Thank you. I think we're heading for an interesting Q&A session. We already got a couple of questions, which is very, very inspiring, and looking forward to. I think now I request another distinguished guest of honor for this evening, Professor Janakarajan, PhD, to share his thoughts. I think we got two different perspectives, and madam also shared Younger Beauty Pillai. I think one thing about Younger Beauty Pillai, the producer made a big money, had a good loft to his all the way to his bank, and that is what great success story also of the film fraternity. Over to you, Mr. Janakarajan. Looking forward to hearing.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Captain Dr. Vijay Kumar, for this wonderful opportunity. Now, actually, I'm going to switch off my video, because once I do if I keep my video on, my audio will be affected. So, with your permission, I will switch it off. And I must confess that I'm not an expert in this field of research, and I'm neither a man specialized in social and linguistic history, nor have done any work on Dravidian movement in particular. So as you mentioned earlier, I'm basically a development economist, but drifted to specialize in water, ecology, and environment. Therefore, discussing subject today is actually personally a great learning experience, and particularly reading Satyamurthy's book is such a wonderful opportunity. I must tell you, it is a great learning experience for me. So whatever I'm going to discuss is actually, may not be as provocative as Dr. Narayan and other speakers said, but let me stick to the title, which is the social infrastructure as political investment for economic development, Tamil Nadu experience. No, and I would like to really, place it in the larger context of, the Satyamurthy's book, J to J. Let me first of all congratulate Satyamurthy for having ventured into such a huge exercise of tracing the history and the evolution of Dravidian movement in Tamil Nadu. Many scholars have worked on this subject in the past, but this book not only traces the history in the larger socio-economic and political context, but also analyzes the evolutionary process of the Dravidian movement. Let me say again, he analyzes the evolutionary process of the Dravidian movement, its causes, consequences, scope, and limitations, and most importantly, brings to light how a social movement could and can successfully evolve itself into a political movement and then into a political party. So that's the best part of the book. I think that part, this has come out very, very nicely. So you see, in history, there are many social movements. Many social movements actually either we missed them, or none of these movements could really form into any kind of political party. But this is one situation where we could see that this kind of a social movement have emerged and could transform itself into a very successful political party. So the Dravidian parties still sustain from that moment onwards, and now they gain more strength and they rule the state. So that is the larger context I think I would like to mention. Satyamurthy also brings to light an extremely critical issue which many past analysts of the Dravidian movement have either bypassed or have conveniently ignored. This is a very important point. The key point is that why the Justice Party was predominantly restricted to opposing the Brahmin domination as opposed by the upper caste non-Brahmins. So this is basically a movement of the upper caste non-Brahmins opposing the Brahmin domination. Therefore, the Justice Party and the non-Brahmin movement were scarcely directed against the atrocities meted out to the Dalit population, who were the most oppressed socially and economically, not only by Brahmins, but also by the upper caste and non-Brahmins who form the basis for forming the Justice Party. This is an extremely important point. Satyamurthy rightly concludes by saying that Periyar would have met with lots of resistance from the upper caste population had he ventured into fighting against the Dalit oppression. This is very, very true. Perhaps that would have been the end of the Dravidian movement, and indeed we might not have seen the parties such as DMK and the ADMK and the MDMK had he really resisted with the upper caste non-Brahmins and supporting the Dalits. That did not happen. So let me quote Satyamurthy as a very, very beautiful sentence, and he writes, his efforts, meaning Periyar's efforts would have also met with a massive internal resistance and may not have even taken off if he had tried otherwise. An internal equity among the castes within the larger non-Brahmin social milieu could have turned against him. So that's a perfect point, a very good point. And I must say that the legacy is still being maintained by the Dravidian parties with no concrete effort or measure taken to end atrocities against the Dalits, except measures such as opening up of doors for better educational opportunities, employment opportunities, creation of Samathapuram, and so on and so forth. But there is no concrete sort of measures to end the atrocities against Dalits. You know, the K1 incident of, I think that 19, which year was that? I think 19, which year? I think K1 incident was the best example to show that. The whole country is stunned at looking at the state of Tamil Nadu and Tamils today. The big question in everybody's mind across the country is why Tamil Nadu is so different and why Tamils are so different. How are they unique? What is the uniqueness of their culture and the language? Why don't they want to speak, learn and speak Hindi? What is their problem? Because the whole country is not against Hindi, but except Tamil. Tamil Nadu and Tamil population are against Hindi for very, very, very long time. Despite their resistance to join the mainstream politics, how is that Tamil Nadu and the Tamils and Tamil Nadu state are socially and economically far advanced compared to many other states? And this is a big question. Although they don't want to join the mainstream politically and by learning Hindi and culturally and otherwise, they still maintain their uniqueness and they still maintain their economic advancement, social advancement, and they stand apart compared to many other states in the country. In fact, they're number 2 economically. Most importantly, how is that the ruling national political party continuously fails to make any impact on the Tamil Nadu politics? Because this has been the big issue. The ruling party is unable to make any impact on the ruling Tamil Nadu politics. These are some of the questions which trouble common man as well as scholars across the nation. But for people in Tamil Nadu, politics is business as usual. For us, this is business as usual. It is nothing but to choose one of the Dravidian parties to form the government, either DMK or ADMK, for 50 years. This has been going on. This is amazing. This is an amazing kind of a situation which has got hugely, because of the Justice Party movement and the non-Brahmin movement started by Periyar. Building social infrastructure in the state by the Dravidian polity over many decades has undoubtedly contributed positive contributions in not only empowering the vast majority of the socially deprived, but also help to build their economic empowerment. This is very important. You see, not only that is socially empowered, but also economically empowered. The state's contribution to the growth and development has been astonishingly high and ranks second next to Maharashtra. The state has set new high standards in literacy, cutting dropout rates in schools and colleges, achieving new levels in higher education, in particular technical engineering education and in medical education, and maintaining healthcare and nutritional security, and most importantly, introduce gender equality in getting access to equal share in the family property. This was introduced when Karnanidhi became the chief minister first. The first time in the country introduced equal share to the girls also of the parents the father's parents' property. Now, why was Periyar's movement was predominantly a non-Brahmin movement? This is another important issue. It was because Brahmins were dominating all important social, economic, and political positions, including government jobs, including Indian National Congress Party, hence the emergence of Justice Party. So the non-Brahmins who were asking for justice, they thought that this kind of things cannot go on, and we have to end the Brahmins' domination, and that is when it became a non-Brahmin movement. Nevertheless, there are other key points made in the book which are extremely critical, which I would like to now talk about. One, the most interesting point emerging from Satyamurthy's book is that although the Dravidian movement and its fundamental ideology, as consolidated by Periyar, was against the superstitions, God beliefs, particularly Hindi beliefs, besides directing all the beliefs against the Brahmin dominations in the society. That is something very, very interesting. You see, it was against God beliefs, and it was against Brahmin domination. But interestingly, a vast majority was attracted by Periyar's ideology, not because they were against a god, or they were non-God believers, but they were attracted by what was called the social issues which Periyar could really successfully introduce and discuss. But despite the limitations of the movement, Periyar is still hailed as a rationalist, as a guide and philosopher of the Dravidian movement. There are reasons. Periyar went far ahead from mere God beliefs. He fought very intensely against caste oppression, social and economic oppression, gender discrimination, advocated the principle of equal opportunities in education and employment, touched upon the very sensitive issue of a caste-based reservation for education and employment, fought against a Hindi imposition as in the 1950s and in the state, and more. He was considered on the whole, a holistic social reformer rather than a preacher of a mere anti-God slogan. And that makes a lot of difference, because he was just not making slogans against God and Hindi beliefs, and he was really talking about, you believe in it. If you believe in God, I don't care, but then this is what I'm going to say. But at the same time, come along, we are going to fight against all the social oppressions and economic oppressions. That made a lot of difference. The DMK and ADMK, though departed from the hardcore Periyar ideology today, they still are surviving and survived and reached newer heights in politics precisely because they upheld the principle of social justice. In fact, as the previous speaker said, 69% reservation for OBC has really caught the minds of everybody. So this kind of a caste-based reservation in education employment have won the hearts of everybody, the common man. Their political survival and popularity was almost due to this commitment. Most important. Okay. I know a friend of mine, a colleague of mine in MIDS, Professor MSS Pandya, who is no more. He wrote a book called The Image Trap about MGR, how MGR could really emerge as a great leader, how he really trapped the common man with his, images in the film that he built over a period of time. And he made the point it was a great success in politics because of the image that he could really build for himself through his movies, such as that Survivor of the Poor, Savior of Women, the person of no personal bad habits such as smoking, drinking, etc. It is this image which helped to consolidate the cadres to gain his strong political foothold in the state. This is his argument. But one can also argue that MGR's image trap alone would not have given him such a strong opportunity, and it was the Periyar's and the DMK's political discourses which helped and perhaps nurtured his party, ADMK. Indeed, when Kalaignar Karunanidhi assumed charge as a CM for the first time in 1960. Sorry?
Go ahead, sir. Sorry.
Yeah, indeed, when Kalaignar Karunanidhi assumed charge as the CM for the first time in 1969, the kind of a social and economic measures that he introduced were absolutely stunning. Some such measures are like, for instance, the first time in the history, slum clearance program, an abolition of hand-pulling rickshaws. Even in West Bengal, the left-front government ruled states, hand-pulling rickshaws were there for a very long time. I think even now it exists in some parts of the country. But he abolished it in 1969. And modernizing the government hospitals and the social security, health care, and all that introduced as early as 1969. Later, when MGR assumed charge as a CM through the ADMK, he introduced the free noon meal scheme, which other speakers also spoke, which was a great hit and helped positively to enhance the school enrollment and helped to cut drastically the school dropout rates. And in fact, the well-known social scientists, Nobel laureate like Sen, John Dries, and others have hailed the policies of the state on social security, healthcare, noon meal scheme, etc., etc. I think this is, in that sense, I think the Tamil Nadu state stands apart. The biggest advantage is we think we in India is the demographic dividend. We all talk about the demographic dividend, meaning that a country has the largest younger population in the world in the prime working age, is to a great extent reaped in the state of Tamil Nadu solely because of the high education levels across all castes. Whereas in other parts of the country, the demographic dividend was not reaped and was not harvested in Tamil Nadu. We could successfully reap the benefits of the demographic dividend precisely because of the high education levels, and across all states, our literacy levels are very high, particularly in the higher education. This can be attributed to the serious social justice measures, adopted series of social justice measures adopted by the successive Dravidian party government in the state. Now, another important issue which comes out from the book is that the caste and class are interwoven in the country and in Tamil Nadu also. That is one of the reasons why the success of the Dravidian movement could really get along, and they could really go for the new height. Because when you talk about the scheduled caste population, you are also talking about the poorest of the poor. So when I talk about the caste and the caste atrocity, I'm also talking about the economic atrocity. So when Periyar talked about the caste and caste oppression, that also went along with the caste class, the nexus. The future of the Dravidian politics is something very interesting. I just wanted to mention, it will survive. The theory that those who are born during the 1980s and 90s are totally unaware of the Periyar and Annadurai and M. Karunanidhi and so on, and hence they will not subscribe to the Dravidian ideology, is a misconception. Many people say that the younger generation who are around 40 would not subscribe to Annadurai and Karunanidhi and MGR. But this is a misconception according to me, because the real beneficiaries of the Dravidian movement are this particular age group. Most of us are born after MK Gandhi, but we are still remembering Gandhi and subscribing to Mahatma Gandhi and his philosophy. The same is true of all tall leaders, social reformers, and revolutionaries of the past. If at all there is some memory loss for the younger generation, the present ruling political dispensation reminds us of the people of Tamil the people of Tamil Nadu that what is non-secularism, what is religious extremism, what is caste and religious oppression, etc., etc. Therefore, the issue of the fight against the non-secularism, fight against the caste and religious oppression is coming back because of the dispensation at Delhi. So most important of all, what is being most hated in the Dravidian party ruled state is to remind them that they are Hindus. They should have faith in Hindu God, learn Hindi, Sanskrit, etc., Tamil. Given their linguistic and religious identity, are religious fanatics, and their faith is deeply rooted in secular principles and peaceful coexistence in the society. So they are not for any kind of a revolt, and they want a peaceful coexistence, and they want to maintain their linguistic and cultural identity. At the same time, they're not going to go against any kind of the national politics. But if they're going to introduce the Hindi or any kind of religious imposition on the Tamil Nadu and people, they're going to vote against it. And this policy which is going to remind them of the Periyar and the social reforms, the reasons for the social reform that became a big issue in the 50s and 60s, and that is almost coming up again because of the ruling dispensation at the center. Finally, I would like to bring to your attention that how competitive politics and competitive populism have helped not only the survival of the rival Dravidian parties, DMK and ADMK, but in the process have immensely benefited the cause of social justice and economic justice to a great extent in the state. And a series of welfare measures are introduced in the state are fantastic, and I think it is unparalleled compared to other states in the country. So therefore, the competitive politics between DMK and DMK in mobilizing support for introducing new welfare measures have really helped a great deal. And the religious harmony that is prevalent today can be to a large measure attributed to the Periyar movement, and that cannot be different. How different Tamil Nadu state from the rest of the country in terms of socio-economic institutional governance, etc., etc. I think there are quite a large number of statistics I can give you. I'm going to stop here, and because there's an immense, quite a large number of statistics available which shows how Tamil Nadu is distinctly different from the rest of the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Janakarajan, for the thought-provoking insights. Very different perspective, great. And your one observation, Tamil Nadu is different from Tamil people. Very, very interesting. We got a number of questions. Let me address the first question, which has come from our YouTube viewer to you, Mr. Janakarajan. That you have been keenly watching Tamil Nadu's socio-economic scene. Can you pinpoint its shortcomings, if any? And also one more added question to that is, with reference to the title of the webinar, where are we headed today? You know, the title of the webinar is Social Infrastructure as a Political Investment for Economic Development. And what is the Tamil Nadu experience? Your views, Mr. Janakarajan.
Yeah, actually, it's a good question. I'm only trying to tell you that in the context of the competitive politics and the competitive populism, I think that although it helped, I think the competitive populism is also may misfire at some stage. I think the ruling dispensation, both the DMK and the ADMK, whoever comes to rule, should be really careful in not really romanticizing the populist measures, and they should be very careful and also keep in mind the real welfare, sustainable welfare, and sustainable development of the state. Because as I also work in the water-related issues, environment-related issues, Tamil Nadu is way behind in environmental standards. So it is not just growth and development which matters. You also have to take care of your ecology and environment, and that is one thing very important, I must tell you. And the second question, what is the second question?
The second question is, what is your views referring to the theme of the book, the theme of the discussion?
The theme of the book is actually, the theme of the book and the theme of the webinar today is the building on the social infrastructure. I won't call it a social infrastructure; it is a social, construct. The social construct, which really matters, that has really done wonders. I would say the social construct is the key for the economic development of the state. So, which is the social construct which has really provided the most fertile ground for the economic development. I think that's very important. I think which you don't see in other parts of the state.
Thank you, Mr. Janakarajan. We got a number of questions. Let me take the YouTube questions before I move to the chat box. Here's a question to Mr. Narayan. Mr. Narayan, you able to hear me, Mr. Narayan?
I'm here.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. The question addressed to you is from Raghuraman from Pondicherry. Sir, in your book, Dravidian Years, you have well documented the success story of Tamil Nadu's noon meal scheme. In your view, which other schemes are the schemes in the state or in the other states is worth studying and writing it about for Mr. Sathiya to think and do that?
Actually, I have talked about two other schemes there. One is in terms of the medical health, I've talked in detail about the scheme of providing medicines and available of really the improvements in the public health service, of really how a particular policy movement made sure that all essential medicines are available at all public sector dispensaries, etc. Very interestingly, I have mentioned the persons who were leading this, and these persons are already advising other states like Bihar and Orissa and all that. But there is an institutional mechanism here which made it succeed. I also said that the success of our public distribution system, which goes back many years, maybe 30, 40 years or so, is extremely unique. And actually, the non-meal scheme distribution is built upon the public distribution system. And today, in any ration shop, you can get your whatever is you're entitled to. These are two great social successes apart from the non-meal scheme. The particular point about privatization of education, I have argued that it was probably MGR's, I would say, dispensation to enable his party to do some good rent seeking rather than to develop the quality of education. And the reason we have large number of doctors here and large number of therefore of clinics here and therefore large number of engineers here, not necessarily due to a policy, but a commercial venture, which I mean I can easily argue that who are the owners of these institutions, and you would see the political linkage of all these owners straight away. So the good as well as the bad, a lot of things to learn from, and a lot of things to think about whether this is the right way to do.
Thank you, sir. Before I move to Sushila madam, the couple of questions just come for you. And I think, Narayan, what do you view on Delhi education? I think I see a lot of people talk quite a lot the Delhi model of education system. Do you think Tamil Nadu could emulate some of the success story of a Delhi education system?
I don't know what people are talking about when they talk about the Delhi education system, because they go by the CBSE model. The state model, where I have already argued that the objection to NEET is because the state syllabus is so far away from the central syllabus, and the bridging is becoming extremely difficult. But we must understand that the Delhi government, the present AAP government, has done wonders in education, and wonders in three ways. One, they have made sure that teachers are present. They are able to monitor the presence of teachers. They are able to monitor the quality of teachers who are giving education. And they are able to monitor attendance as well as presence. And I don't know whether you saw in the last 2 years, the scores of children from government schools getting above 90% are much higher than private schools as a number, as a total number in Delhi, which is an enormous, and this is due to just two people there, a person who is the minister and of course the chief minister who are driving this. It's a great success. It's a great success. We can do a lot of learning from Delhi there.
Thank you, sir. Here's a question to Madam. This from Guru Raj from OSU. What do you want to, Madam, as an impartial observer, what is your take on the conversion rate of investment commitment in the state over, for the last 10 to 15 years? And how many jobs have been actually created? Do you think, are we really converting all what we are really announcing in a big events and a lot of attraction investment in Tamil Nadu?
See, I really don't know. I think the conversion rate is not very bad, but it's never, the announcements are always larger than what really happens. But in Tamil Nadu, jobs are created not by these big investments. This is a very MSME state. The jobs are all created in medium and small scale industries, which is why it was such a disaster during the lockdown, because a lot of them had to shut down and, they lost jobs, their livelihood and so on. Because you really just look around, there are really so many small scale industries. Even in IT, as I said, there'll be young people who are just doing an app or something, making 20 to 40,000 a month. This is that kind of state. And they are below the radar, so nobody knows what is really happening. So here today, if you set up a large automobile factory, it's all so heavily digitized and, mechanized and so on. The labor content is not like how it used to be, say, maybe 25 years ago. But it's the smaller suppliers, small scale industries who provide the jobs. So it's very difficult to make a comment on this.
Thank you, madam. It's a question from me because I've gone through your book. Given a chance to update your book, Search, what recent aspect of Tamil Nadu industry would you like to add and highlight briefly?
I really want to know, because people say this is not a state of startups, but it's quite amazing because I've been writing a column for a newspaper. At least every week I'll get 4 or 5 phone calls to be written about. I had to drop some of the ideas because they just didn't fit in. But it is becoming more entrepreneurial, more younger people want to set up businesses. If you talk to IIT Research Park, Dr. Junjunwala, he says that the fear of setting up a business is gone because people are not so poor. He always used to say they want to support their father, get their sisters married, that kind of thing. That kind of pressure doesn't exist anymore because people have their economic life has improved, which is again, see, I always say we are a very, very under-researched state and country. It's all very well to say these things, but if you ask me for figures, I don't know.
Thank you, madam. Thank you so much for your now the question is, Mr. Narayanan. Sir, looking back, do you think the noon meal scheme would have lasted 40 long years now and growing, but for the MGR government decision to make it a budgeted project? And also another question which has come to you, both the questions have come from Hyderabad, Mr. Raghuram Rajan, is the other one is as a takeoff from today's discussion, what you've been hearing so far, do you think that the huge debt of the state and even the central government are sustainable? From your view as a perspective, as a former finance secretary, what would be one word of wisdom to these two states, this state of situation in the Tamil Nadu?
On the first, the noon meal scheme, I've written about it in detail in the book, and I've gone through all the files of the government there. It was an idea and it was a concept, and it was very close to MGR's heart. Because MGR felt that the poor, especially the poor girl child, was not getting fed at home. And he had to make sure that it was provided. But the way it was converted into a program owed a lot to a lot of people who committed themselves to make it a success. I mean, there were people in the food department, there were people in the transport and logistics department, there were people in the chief secretary's office, there were people in the civil supplies corporation who all took it upon themselves to make it a success. And therefore, the department which was dealing with CM's noon meal program became a very, very important department, not only the secretariat, but in all these districts. And it was one of the responsibilities of the collector to see that it was delivered day after day after day in all the schools. So I think that is absolutely unique. And there was a great opposition initially from Government of India to having universalization of feeding. They said have selective feeding, not universal feeding. To which MGR's answer always was that how do I select? Most of these children don't get a meal at home at all. The people who are accessing this, they don't. So there is a lot of self-selection which is happening. They will come and eat at this only if they are not getting a meal elsewhere. And after about 8 or 10 years, the Government of India started believing this, started agreeing to this, started emulating this, and started treating this as a necessity. So for all the states, you know the late history. So yes, it will succeed. It will run its course. Of course, politics and corruption are eating into it in terms of the quality, the quantity of food, the kind of goods that are supplied, etc. And if at all it will decay due to local politics and enormous corruption. That's the only way that it will decay. The second point is about the sustainability of debt. Debt sustainability is a function of also economic growth. So if you're growing at 10, 11% or 12%, as is certainly possible for a state like Tamil Nadu, you can match your debt, provided you don't throw away money in terms of all the freebies. A lot of the freebies given during the Karunanidhi era, during the Jayalalitha era, they no longer exist. I mean, in the sense that fans and grinders and all that stopped working long ago. TV stopped working. There was a time when 4 goats were given, they were all eaten up, it's all done. So there is no sustainability. This is pure consumption expenditure, which a state should not get into. States do not get into private consumption. States do do something, as you said, about social infrastructure, social development, not about consumption. So if the state continues to pursue its expenditure on consumption, then of course there will be no sustainability.
Thank you so much, sir. I think we have come to the end of the thing. I'll take one last question. I will request each of the distinguished guests of honor to share their views. The 2 last questions is, take pride in Tamil, oppose Hindi. I think briefly some of the speakers have mentioned about this. How do you think the Dravidian ideals are influencing the young voters in Tamil Nadu? The other question is, I think that state where secularism was somewhat alive, this is in Tamil Nadu. Do you think this would take a hit in near future? This is a question which has come from Mr. Kadlur, Mr. Xavier. So I will request each of the speakers to share their insights, because it's a question which really bothering many of the people in the state of Tamil Nadu. And when you are to go to the national level, how do you position yourself? Well, we'll start with Madam. First, you would like to share your views on this. Then we move to Janakarajan, Mr. Narayan for his closing final thoughts on this. Mr. Yes, Ms. Sushila, Madam, your views on this.
What was the first question?
The first question is, take pride in Tamil, oppose Hindi. This is always a slogan, many of the elections thing. And how do you think the Dravidian ideals are influencing young voters in Tamil Nadu? This particularly an anti-Hindi. I think one of the speakers mentioned about this briefly in their opening remarks.
See, I think these kind of slogans are all really optics. Finally, the Tamils, like everybody else, is a practical person. The Tamil is a practical person. You don't have to, if you want to go and get a job in Bombay or Delhi or something, you jolly well learn Hindi. You might hate it. You might hate Hindi from the bottom of your heart, but you don't have a choice. You are a small little state somewhere in the corner of India. So you can't say I'm taking Tamil pride and I'm not going to. How many Tamils are out there and everybody is getting a job. And if you ask me, if you impose Hindi, I will oppose it. But of course, I let my children learn. They learn. You know how many people speak Hindi. Auto rickshaw drivers speak Hindi. So it's one of those things which will fade, but the optics will remain forever. I don't think, because as I said, if you impose Hindi on me, I will oppose it. It's what I feel, because you cannot make anybody stop learning Hindi. They may not go to Hindi Prachar Sabha, but they'll learn if they have to go out of Chennai and find a job. And the second question, sir?
Other one is inclusive growth and cost thing, madam. The next question is, I think the last state where the secularism was somewhat alive is Tamil Nadu. Do you think this would take a hit in near future? Maybe Sathimurthy would like to attend to this thing, sir. Sathimurthy?
Can I just answer it? And
yes, please.
Because I have a strong view about this. I think this is a very secular state. I don't think we've ever had religious conflicts. Having said that, without taking great pride, we must also remember that we kill other castes. We don't kill other religions. We really have caste conflicts. I think we have to put an end to that. The upper caste, lower caste, all about, the Dalits being badly treated and so on. Secularism is strong because we really don't oppose other religions. I always give the example of this Hanuman temple I go to, which is on Mosque Street. There is a Hanuman temple, there's a mosque, and there is also a little church. I don't think anybody even thinks about it. Look at Triplicate, there is Thousand Lights Mosque, there is Parsadi Swami temple. So where is the conflict? But at the same time, you go to interior Tamil Nadu, why are they killing other castes? Why are they opposing intercaste marriages? Why are there all these cases where the young couples are being slaughtered? I want an answer to that.
Brilliant, madam. Brilliant. Satyamurthy would like to answer this. Before that, I request my team, can you unmute Mr. S. Viswanathan from Industrial Economics? You would like to ask a question. That will be the final question from Mr. Viswanathan. Mr. Satyamurthy, your views, please.
Yes, I agree that on secularism, I shared Sushila's views. Caste is also there, secularism as religion, as you understand in the Indian context. Tamil Nadu is a success. For instance, in a state where many are black shirt movement, today black shirt movement, as I have written in my book, J to J, is totally entirely different. Today, lakhs and lakhs of people every year go to Sabarimala from Tamil Nadu and they wear black. So the entire dynamics and the symbolism of that black or what that black dress represent has totally changed in Tamil Nadu. But then the fact is, even when Periyar was there, as Janakarajan pointed out, there was a limited following for that in comparative numbers. Right? Even at that time, the Dravidian parties, I mean, Periyar's anti-Brahmin, anti-God, anti-religion or anti-Hindu views did not carry on with the voters. They were Saivites, Vaishnavites. They were going to temple. They were singing their hymns in whatever language, whether Tamil or Sanskrit or whatever. When it came to vote, and if someone voted for DMK or ADMK subsequently, because Periyar did not float a party to evaluate his electoral presence or dominance, it is very clear that the views, I mean, the votes that went to the Dravidian parties had nothing to do with Periyar's views or their so-called inheritance of Periyar's religious views. But that is, and in fact, if you all of us above 50, 60 will know, the last 20 years, 20, 30 years, development or you say freebies, these were these dominated the political dialogue or ethnic identity vis-a-vis Sri Lankan issue or Kaveri water, then ethnic element was injected into it. But God and religion never came into Tamil Nadu political discourse in the last 20, 30 years. But it is being injected back through the social media and political platform. This is recreating the whole scene. People who have forgotten, the younger generation voters, who are voting for DMK or ADMK not because of the ideology, but because of what the title of the webinar says, what
Thank
they have achieved. That is going to villages. It is not that everyone is going to become a doctor or engineer. There are guys who have passed out, knows how to handle a bank, manage to acquire, to apply for a loan, cars, small shops. SMEs not necessarily in the context of SMEs proper. They have a self-supporting this thing, 3 or 4 taxis, then shops, small textile units. You name it, they are all doing it.
Yeah.
But the problem here is, today they are being re-injected with this kind of an ideology by a counter group. For instance, who are the supporters of actor Seaman? They got 4% vote, 3.87 vote. He is supposed to get more vote this time, I don't know. These are kind of voters, and some people who vote for Kamal Hassan, for instance, we are talking about 8 to 10% votes. They don't want to believe in the Dravidian political ideology, but they are opposed to what the anti-Dravidian political ideology stands for.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And now, Mr. Viswanathan, you know, as our senior, yes, Mr. Satyamurthy, please go ahead.
Tamil cultural identity, angst, etc. I think Dr. Narayan also mentioned it.
Yes.
I'm not promoting my book, but in my 2018 book on Jallikattu, the entire book is on the Tamil angst. Why the Tamil cultural identity crisis? Why? That's the kind of thing. Thank you.
Very important. As you said, Hindi, once you learn, I know when I joined Air Force, how I struggled, but we learn quickly, sir. We have to adapt yourself to the situation. Now we got Mr. Viswanathan joined us.
As far as the language issue is concerned, see, people went to Karachi and Rangoon and Bombay and Delhi nearly 100 years back. They learned Hindi there. So the question that you have to learn Hindi to go to work in Bombay and all that, I think it doesn't apply. And Sushila, who has lived in Bombay, knows that Hindi they teach you in schools in Tamil Nadu or any state that does not have Hindi as a mother tongue or a spoken language is not going to help them in Bombay or Delhi or Calcutta or wherever. You have to pick up the language then and there. What do all the North Indian migrant labor do in India, Tamil Nadu? What kind of exams have they passed in Tamil to come here and work? Within 6 months, don't they learn the language? And in 2 years, they are as comfortable in the language as any of us. So
thank you so much, sir.
Learn the language to work in Bombay or outside Tamil Nadu. I think that is wrong. Precondition.
Thank you, sir. Now we have come to the close. We already overshot the time by more than 5 minutes, which you never do that because we have done it exclusively for Mr. Sathiya. And one final word of comment from Mr. Narayan. He's our senior member, industrial economics editor, and we really own a very high esteem, sir. That's why when you put a message to me, I thought I will give the final question from you. Mr. Viswanathan, what's your question and it's addressed to whom, sir? You unmute yourself, please. You unmute, sir, Mr. Viswanathan. Mr. Viswanathan, unmute yourself, please.
Is it okay? Right.
Yes, perfect. Go ahead, sir.
You see, we've all talked about the success story of the Dravidian movement. I am slightly asking for time to look a little ahead. What are we going to build over this? I have 2-3 concerns which I thought deserve the attention of experts in your panel. One is that the state of the finances are in extremely bad shape. I give just 2 instances. Total revenues of the states are in the region of 181,000 crore. Our expenses are in the region of 248,000 crore. Our expenses, 3 items of our expense eat away the entire thing. Subsidies about 98,000 crore. 111,000 crore. Interest burden, 38,000 crore. Sorry, subsidies 98,000 crore, 111,000 crore of salaries and pensions. These 3 together account for almost our entire expenditure. And we don't have any margin available for any development expenditure. Our Narayan mentioned about the debt side, the capacity for debt. Our debts are estimated to be about 570,000 crore by March next year. So we have enormous problem of servicing this debt. The AIDMK promise alone of freebies this year will amount to about 80,000 crore. Do we have the money or the level of income growth to manage this? 2 other concepts are really worrying because
I want to be very brief, Mr.
I'm sorry, I'll just take 2 minutes.
Yes, please.
UP, the Bimaru states of Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, UP and Rajasthan have now started ticking. Their agricultural performance has been extremely exemplary. Contrast with Tamil Nadu, it is absolutely in a bad shape. We produce 25 lakh tons of sugar. Today we are producing hardly 8 to 10 lakh tons of sugar. The sugar industry is dying. Half the sugar mills are closed. Our own entrepreneurs are not making much investment, as pointed out by Narayan. We are looking ahead for investments from outside, which is not going in torrents as it happened in the 90s. So my concern is, okay, we are singing praise on the movement so far, the growth so far of the state. Are we not looking ahead at the problem when we don't have land prices are extremely costly here, unlike in UP, Uttar Pradesh or Rajasthan or Madhya Pradesh. They can give thousands of acres of land for development. Their labor laws have been liberalized. We have not done nothing about that. So I am concerned the infestant flow can be attracted better by the Bimaru states. They have enormous opportunity of catching, not just catching up with us, even overtaking us. I thought I should caution on these two areas because I'm looking not just yesterday. The book has done a woman's service in looking ahead to the past 100 years. Can we try to look at least until at about, say, 2030?
Thank you so much, sir. As I think since you really overshot, you see very thought-provoking questions. I know this is a concern which some of the speakers did mention in their observation while they were addressing. Thanks so much. I think we have come to the end of the session, and thanks so much to our distinguished speaker this evening, Mr. Narayan and Dr. Narayan, and Sushila, Ravindranath, Janakarajan, and our my dear friend Sathiya. Since you are not there, normally we do hybrid event. If you are present, we would have really loved to present you with some lovely books and lovely memento of MMA. But during difficult times, we also do something differently. As a token of our appreciation, we would like to present, we would like to present 400 face masks on your behalf, because even though the vaccine has come, the only thing which can save us is the face mask. What we do in MMA, our team goes around different places, give the face mask to the people needy, educate them, make them understand what this will only save till they are, even the vaccine is there, still you have to wear a face mask. Thanks so much. It's another interesting subject which we discussed this evening, and social infrastructure as a political investment, and thought-provoking views, and a number of views there come, which each one of us would have really taken it to understand how Tamil Nadu is going to be a great state, and which each one of us are so proud to belong to, and we are brought in some phenomenal laurels, not only to the nation, to the world actually. Some of the world best of the companies, the CEOs are from Tamil Nadu. So it makes a lot of difference. Thanks so much to each one of you for joining this evening, and thanks large number of viewers watching on social media, more 100 people. Thanks so much, and good night to each one of you, and good night, Mr. Timothy, for coming. Thanks, Mr. Narayan, for sharing your insight. Janakarajan, thank you once again for joining us. We would like to have you sometime discussing on the water front. I think it's long overdue now. Thank you, madam. It's always a pleasure to have you with us, Sushila, madam. It's lovely you joined us and shared your insight. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Good
you.
night from me.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Stay safe and stay healthy until we meet again. Bye-bye and good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Thanks.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night, Mr.